Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, thank you very much for attending today's session. Today, we have in this session teacher Viktor Carrasquero, okay, representative of British Council. In today's session, he will talk about from the lab to the classroom, fleshing out phonetic theory in our teaching. Okay, so today, Mr. Carrasquero will talk about the experience of designing a pronunciation-focused course intended for early years learners, ages 4 or 5 years old. In this session, Victor will use the practical task of setting up a course syllable to highlight principles applicable in embedding pronunciation into all classes. Well, many of the examples to be given in this session come from an EY context. The principles and ideas will hopefully be useful for teaching at any life stage. In this case, Mr. Carrasquero is a Venezuelan English teacher, an educator, phonetician, teacher trainer, and academic manager. He has taught learners from all life stages in a wide range of contexts. Right now, he works in Hong Kong, where he coordinates and delivers teacher training and supervises teaching qualifications as a Cambridge Delta and Trinity College London Deep TESOL tutor. Mr. Carrasquero, are you here?
Well, I'm definitely here. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, Mr. Carrasquero. It is a pleasure to have you here at our university, virtually speaking. And well, this virtual platform, okay, is all yours. One more time, welcome to Universidad Austral, especially to the English teaching program.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk about a topic that I love and something that I work on every single day. I'm just gonna share my screen so you can see what I talk about as I cover the top. In a minute, I'm going to ask for your opinion, by the way, on something. So hopefully you can use the chat box to give me your ideas. So yeah, I'm calling from Hong Kong in China. It's 10 p.m. now, so it's really late for me. It's been a long day, but I'm really looking forward to your ideas and to this exchange. So I train teachers at British Council here in Hong Kong and in other places as well. And I'm a teacher of English and I'm a phonetician. Um, so I study the properties of the sounds of English as spoken by real people, of course. But today's session, I'll tell you a little bit about how to flesh out phonetic theory, because we tend to focus a lot on phonetics and phonology from the theoretical perspectives, and sometimes we miss out on opportunities to exploit what we know about theory in the actual classroom. So I'll tell you a bit about that. Um, Before I even show you, by the way, the aims of the session, I want you to tell me something, at least in the chat box. I do have a one question, which is twofold, and it really depends on your experience. By the way, fleshing out something, I'm sure you know, but I'm gonna tell you anyway. It's about bringing it to life, giving it shape, giving it a form, turning it, you know, reality into reality. So that's what I like about phonetics and the teaching of pronunciation. It gives you a chance to, uh, make dreams come true. So let's see how we go about doing that in the remainder of the session. So this is my question. It's basically the same question, but if you are teaching at the moment, I'd like you to tell me the pronunciation features that you often do focus on in your classroom, in your English as a foreign language classroom or English as a second language classroom. Depends on where you are and your context. And if you're not teaching, what features are you drawn to? What features do you like focusing on? I'm talking about anything, different levels of phonetic reality into suprasegmental, segmentals, sounds, vowels, consonants, intonation, stress. What are you drawn to? You can let me know in the chat box. I'd like to see where you're coming from this morning. Ooh, endings. So syllable endings, word endings, any kind of ending. Nice, keep them coming. I love that. I sometimes focus on ed endings, though I'm not too sure if it has that much of a consequence in my classes, to be fair. Ignacio says that he'd focus on intonation and the inflections the voice must do while producing speech. I love intonation. Intonation is dual in the sense that it conveys meaning, semantic meaning, and it also conveys pragmatic meaning. So intonation is beautiful. I love it. You can embed a lot of meaning into your utterances just with the intonation. And it's a beautiful phenomenon. Babies learn it from, very, very, very early. Past tenses. Yes. Thank you, Camila. And Karen agrees with Ignacio. I love that. A little bit of cooperation this morning. People agreeing with each other. All right. What about things, elements, features that you like practicing yourself? You can also tell me a bit about that. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's such an important aspect. Word stress is such an important aspect of um, pronunciation studies and the teaching of pronunciation, to be fair. I love focusing on sentence stress, nuclear stress, as in stressing the most important info in a thought group. That is so important, and many students struggle with that. Highlighting the key info in a thought group is so important. Um, Using contractions, that's so cool. It's so important because, well, according to what I'm saying, everything's important, but contractions are interesting because uh, they really help speakers put everything together and sort of speak more naturally. in the sense that we really pronounce words as if it were just the one word. Uh, that makes you think of connected speech as well, because contraction is a connected speech phenomenon. Intonation, I love intonation. Yeah, absolutely. All right, you can keep telling me. And I'm gonna show you the two things that we'll cover. I'll try to give you time at the end for you to ask any questions that you may have, but feel free to comment in the chat box throughout the session, because I may say something controversial and you may want to react, respond, criticize what I say. So do feel welcome to put that comment in the chat box. So these are the areas that we'll cover today. First, we're going to have a look at the steps I followed designing a course. This course, it was a pre-phonics course aimed at 3 and 4-year-old students. You might say, but I'm not going to be teaching kindergarten. Well, I'm not a kindergarten teacher. I'm a phonetics specialist and I'm a teacher of English. So you can still apply your knowledge in defining the needs of a group of learners. And this is an exercise in exactly that. And I hope that the principles I'll outline, I propose, taken from bibliography and my experience, can help you also define your priorities. And then we're gonna go beyond the kindergarten classroom. We're gonna think about key elements that we all should focus on when teaching pronunciation. Of course, it's my opinion, um, based on the bibliography. At the end, I'll show you the bibliography that I often consult, but of course, I'll also share the presentation deck with you so you can I embedded a lot of links so you can check all the articles and all the books that I often consult, if that's something that you might like. I don't know. I think you might. Okay, we can move on. And this is, so I promise I'm not plugging a product. I need to tell you a little bit about British Council in Hong Kong, but only because I'm talking about a course we designed, a course I designed. So I need to tell you a little bit about it. So our kindergarten suite has basically two large groups of courses. The first one is general kindergarten, which is just a general English type of course for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. What I mean by general kindergarten is what you mean by general English, a course where students have to learn reading, writing, listening, speaking, and the components, pronunciation, lexis, and grammar. And we also have an English phonics suite, which has 6 different levels. And what we do in a phonics class is to help learners develop their reading and writing skills. Um, they start studying these phonics courses when they are 3 years old. So they're really, really young. They're pre-phonics and they're pre-kindergarten. So that means that they haven't started mainstream schooling. They are about to start school. And as such, they have very little experience with reading and writing. So you can already anticipate the type of difficulty that we were having with the phonics courses, mostly at the beginning of the program, when we welcome the 3-year-olds that have no experience reading, no experience writing. Um, and I'll tell you a bit more about the challenges that we had. Remember, you can just post questions you have in the chat box and I'll answer as soon as I can. So the target learners, we're dealing with kindergarten and pre-kindergarten students from 3 to 5, and some of them are even 6 anyway. And their first language, I am in Hong Kong, I work in Hong Kong, so most of them have Cantonese as their L1. Some of them have Putonghua as their L1, which is Cantonese is the language spoken in Hong Kong, and Putonghua is spoken on mainland China, which is pretty much across from here. I can almost see it. Um, and this is important because in analyzing your group of learners, you have to keep an eye on their L1 because their L1 might you might see transference between L1 and L2, and you do see how L1 influences L2 acquisition. You can hear it in my accent, you can hear it in my pronunciation, how my underlying Spanish defines my English. You can hear it in everybody. Anyway, it's only natural. Um, then their learning aims, their learning needs is to, well, basically prepare to start mainstream schooling. These 4 and 5 year olds in Hong Kong will start attending interviews. They will interview to enter, to enroll in schools. It's a very cutthroat education system. And at 5 and at 4 years old, they're already interviewing. So they need to be prepared. I'm not sure if it's the same system in Chile. Actually, I should have asked you. Um, and the issue, the reason we decided to design a pre-phonics course was that at the beginning of the phonics suite, uh, many learners were unable to blend and segment sound. So for those of you who don't know, blending sound is putting two and more sounds together. And that's the foundation of reading. So for example, and I'm going to give you the most prototypical example, the velar, the voiceless velar a stop, and then that very open vowel, and the voiceless alveolar stop. If you put them together, if you blend them, you make cat. And that's the principle of reading, right? So they were struggling at the beginning of their phonics journey. So we wanted a course that would give them basic foundational tools so that when they started phonics 1, they would feel at home, they would feel at ease, and they wouldn't be like, what are they asking me? What's my teacher asking me to do? Because at 3 and at 4, there's so many variables that as a teacher you have to control. You even have to think of separation anxiety when parents leave. So expecting them to think about, you know, putting 2 or 3 sounds together is already a lot of stress. So that's what we wanted the course I designed to serve. We wanted to give them basic tools to segment and to blend. So blending is putting sounds together. Segmenting is the opposite. You see a large language unit like a word, and the ability to split each of the sounds, that's segmenting. So if you see the word cat, you are immediately able to segment. You segment into k, a, t, because you know how to read and write. You see the world, you see reality as a separated entity, but children see reality as oneness. So I'm giving you also bits of philosophy here, bits of developmental cognitive psychology. Children tend to see everything as a big oneness, and teaching them how to read and write is a process of teaching them about the separateness of the world, which doesn't really exist in acoustic reality, as you well know. Um, so what we did was this. This is just a random photo of my drives, my PC section, just to show you the type of courses that we have here. So this is like a sneak peek into our products. So um, the problem of the phonics suite is that they rely heavily on children's natural ability to spot and segment nuanced differences. So I'm going to show you the type of activity that we were expecting them to do without foundational tools. A lot of phonics courses, and I'm going to mention here Jolly Phonics. Jolly Phonics is a commercial course. Jolly Phonics. They rely a lot on making magic happen. They just assume that children, because they're children and their brain is flexible, they're just going to learn. They're just going to listen to you and they're going to learn. When actually, overt instruction is equally important. They need overt instruction. Overt instruction is necessary mostly, even more so, for reading and writing. Reading and writing are not natural processes. Speaking is a natural process. As you know, speech is language, but reading and writing are artificial processes that are tough. Even for you and for me, reading and writing are tough processes. So yeah, that's one problem that we wanted to address. The other problem is that reading in general involves separating, breaking down those word and sentence units into smaller units, smaller segments. That's the principle of segmenting, right? And also, some children are just not naturally inclined to making contrasts at the level of segments. And we're asking them to listen to a word, and we're asking them to segment, we're asking them to tell us the different sounds. That is expecting a lot at the very beginning of a course. And I'm going to show you just now what I mean, the type of activity that we tend to do in Phonics 1. Not in the course I designed, but in the general suite that we have. So I'm gonna share something else so you can see. So this is a typical lesson 1 in our phonics courses. They would introduce a new sound. Here we have the sound ah, 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 ah. Notice that it's not a phonetic sound because it's not within brackets or within slant lines. It's actually a letter sound, right? But we're teaching them to read, we're teaching them, the learners, to identify a sound when they see a letter. We're creating the connection, right? So we show them ah, ah, ah. Why am I doing this? I'll show you in a few seconds. Then we introduce some words that they might know, like which contain the word, which contain the sound, I'm sorry. In this case, all of these are alliteration examples. The vowel is at the beginning of the word, by the way. And then they would move on to doing something like this. They would learn an action. In this case, it's ants on my arm. So ants, because ants has that sound at the beginning. So we teach them to make an association between a physical action, like doing this, just doing this, basically, ah, 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 so that we can elicit that sound response from them as we do the action. And we do something like this sometimes, because we're teaching them also to recognize the graphology, the letter. We get them to trace the letter, and we're doing it online now. And we get children to either draw using the annotate tool here on Zoom, or we get them to move their hands in the air because it's the same skill, just tracing a letter. Um, and finally, we do blending and segmenting. Notice the level of complexity. First, practicing the sound. You see my car, I'm driving my car, and now I'm driving below. And every time you see my car below, you say it as well. and again, and then when you see my car below the next one, you say that one. Ah, ah, ah. So that's basically the principle of blending. And without basically any reason, we expect our children, we expect our learners to little by little put those sounds closer together, to blend those sounds. In reality, they do start doing it because the children are language learning machines. But in theory, this is just magic. Our ability to little by little get learners to put two sounds together, that's just a connection that their very flexible brains make at a pace that we can't even imagine. But this is the type of very challenging activity that we're asking them to do. Now, I'm gonna go back to my presentation because that's what I wanted to show you, the type of thing that we do at the beginning of the phonics course. Now, what am I proposing? What did we propose to do before the phonics suite? We proposed a phonemic awareness course to help learners identify and reproduce a range of sounds, not only linguistic sounds. And you might say, so this is not phonetics. Well, children need to be able to work on their ability to spot a sound, identify it, and reproduce it, because that is the principle of segmenting, which will enable them to blend later on, to put sounds together. Um, then, yes, this is exactly what I'm saying in the second point. This is going to help them understand how big elements like words and sentences are made of smaller units. Because if you say, if a child hears, this is it, this is it, this is it, this is it, that sounds literally like just one thing. It doesn't really sound like first three words, and then it doesn't sound like all the sounds it has. We have learned to segment those three words into the units that we do, but they still haven't developed that ability. How do we do it in a phonemic awareness course? That's what I'm going to show you now. So we have a few elements here. We devised 6 parts. The first part is all about getting learners to identify sounds in the environment, to spot them, listen to that. What's producing that sound? Can you imitate the sound? Because that's basically enabling the child to gain a process that will be extremely useful later on when they learn more about L2 and L1. Because, at 3, 4, and 5, they're learning L1 and L2 as the same thing. There's really no divide. Of course, those of you who are psycholinguists, feel free to kill me. Another part is to get children to play with instrumental sounds. Some schools have xylophones, some schools have drums, but if your school doesn't really have anything, you also have part 3, you have body percussion. Children have their hands, children have their feet, which they can stomp on the floor, or they can clap, they can knock on their desk, they can knock on the computer. So these are very important. Instrumental sounds and body percussion are really, really important. One, because children need to feel sound in their body, just like your learners need to feel sound in their bodies, like what you do with voicing, of getting your learners to, feel their throat, getting your learners to feel the vibration on their face when they pronounce d, 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 or when they pronounce z. pretty much the same principle of feeling sound in your body. We use body percussion and instrumental sounds also for introducing, as I'm going to show you in a bit, introducing nuance, introducing sound nuance like pace and volume. Pace and volume are the principles that underlie intonation and stress. So notice that we're taking a step behind to introduce the principles of phonetic features. We're not really telling them, oh, hi, 5-year-olds, today we're doing intonation. Not at all. We're practicing the foundations behind or underlying the phonetic features. We also have part 4, which is about rhyme. Part 4 and 5 are connected. Rhyme and alliteration are two sides of the same of a connected thing. Rhyme is the ending of the words and the fact that some words have similar endings, like realize and actualize. Those two rhyme because they have the same endings. That's very important for children to discover because that helps them spot sounds that are similar and sounds that are different. That is phonemic awareness. The ability a child has to say, oh, that's the same sound. Oh, that's a different sound. It's really easy for us, but it means the world for a child. Alliteration is basically sounds whose in words whose initial sounds are the same or similar. Um, so I would say that the phrase, you see, I come up with French phrases in sessions about English. The phrase tete a tete is alliterative just because those two words have the same initial sound. And finally, we have an element of sound blending, um, which is then putting linguistic sounds together. Um, I think I'll show you an example of what I mean by environmental sounds and getting learners to notice them. Um, we think it is important to raise learners' awareness of the sounds that surround them because that helps them make associations. And we can do activities of a narrative type. We can use a narrative context to also introduce real life and associate it with actual sounds that they hear as they walk around, as they go to school. Um, so teacher can tell stories. Teacher can ask students to tell their own stories. I'm going to show you an example now. So I'm going to share my practical presentation again. So I keep toggling between windows today, guys. So I normally begin by telling them, well, we hear many sounds, and then I get them to hear one sound in particular. In this case, it's this one. And well, you're free to guess what that was. I think it's somebody walking. I think it's steps, but you can come up with anything. And then I just elicit all kinds of sounds, making the association by playing the sound file. And then, yeah, they have a little break. They review the different sounds they hear in the city. You have the train, a door closing, somebody taking a shower. And we make a little sound story about Susie, about that girl you see on the left hand side of the screen. And she does different things around the city. And as I unveil the objects, students tell me they have to reproduce, they have to make, they have to imitate the sound. You're like, what? What's this? How's this pronunciation? Remember, this is all about what's before, what lies beneath um, the ability to spot a sound, to isolate a sound, and to tell it from another sound. So that's why we're going way back, the rudiment of segmenting and blending. Um, Now, I'm going to give you another example. This is about environmental sounds, but what about body percussion? Well, you already have the photos there. Um, I designed this course when we first went online in 2020. I was asked to design a phonemic awareness course for a physical classroom, then COVID. So everything had to move online because in our kindergarten we do actually have a xylophone, and I just was like, how do I play a xylophone online, or how do I play any instrument? But I really hadn't thought of I really hadn't thought of the plethora of possibilities of children at home sitting at a desk, just using their desk as drums, or using their own chest as as drums, and um, embedding sound into my presentations so that they could hear what I play as well. The principle of this is very similar to the environmental sounds, but instruments, noisemakers, and their own bodies allow you to introduce rhythm, speed, and volume, because you can ask them to change, you can ask them to vary. As I said before, rhythm, speed, and volume are the basis, the foundation of intonation of all suprasegmentals, because suprasegmentals are about changes in voice, basically. Um, so yeah, children also were introduced to the notions of quiet, loud, and slow and fast. You can see, actually, yeah, I'm not gonna toggle to show you my example because I think the visual example is really good. I used several associations. You have the turtle, you have a kangaroo, to portray fast and slow, and you can see that I embedded sound files to demonstrate the different paces, the different speeds. But we also did the same for rhythm and for volume. And of course, the aim of all of these is for children to also reproduce the changes uh, in volume and rhythm and speed. Um, So yeah, they also had to do at the end, they had to match qualities with body movements, pretty much like we do when we do TPR, total physical response. Um, but yeah, I think I do have to show you at least one more example. Um, don't kill me just yet. Yeah, it's a very cute example because I had all this party context, and I told them that somebody special was coming, and the somebody special was hidden behind this box. You can guess who it is anyway. I told them that my friend hiding was he loved sounds, and we would have to learn how to make sounds in different ways. For example, we had to learn how to play slow maracas or very fast maracas, or also quiet castanets or loud castanets, among many others anyway. And yeah, we did have our break, and I just told them that I needed their help to make my little friend happy. You can see, finally you can see who my friend is. It's just Teddy. Um, and I got them to reproduce, I got them to imitate the different variables. These are sound nuances, by the way, and they are phonetic features as well, um, of volume and pace. And they just sang Here they see my friend. My friend is bored because nobody's playing any sounds for him. And then I ask them to reproduce the different features: loud, quiet, fast, and slow, so that my friend um, became happy. Um, Now, I do have one more thing, and that's about alliteration and rhyme. Notice how we are approaching a more slowly, we're approaching a more linguistic area. And that's the intention, because alliteration and rhyme are all about initial and final sounds. Um, so this is really key because it helps children isolate what's at the beginning and what's at the end of a word. So they get to hear rhyming words, they get to hear alliterative words, and they get to match them and reproduce them, and possibly even think of more examples, other words that rhyme, other words that have similar or the same ending. That's already thinking in linguistic terms, although we're not telling them we're thinking about language anyway. That's it. Um, so as you can see in the photo, they were just matching the photos, the pictures in green with the pictures outside of the frame in blue. So that was really, really easy. Then they had to invent a toy with alliterative characteristics that I gave them. But yeah, you can check it out later on. Because at this point, and remember to prepare your questions for a few minutes in the future, I want to go beyond early years for a few minutes because I want to think of implications. So I'm going to play something for you, ladies and gentlemen, and I want you to tell me what you think about it. I want you to tell me, and I'm going to put it in the chat box, if what you hear is, I'm actually writing, typing in the chat box. I want you to tell me if what you hear is this, or this. So you have three variants of the variable intelligibility. So listen and give me your impression in the chat box. Intelligible, more or less, or not intelligible? I just want to know your opinion. Let me play it.
I think be a journalist, they must be very fancy on their job and be, be true about the things, and they also need to help to find something to help the people, not just argue something.
Uh, you're free to give me your opinion now, if you heard anything anyway. Um, as you give me your idea, there's no right or wrong here. As you give me your idea, I'm gonna play it once more in case you couldn't hear it well. Ooh, I can see private messages. Yes, you can also private message me. Ah, sorry.
A journalist, they must be very fancy on their job and be, be true about the things, and they also need to help to find something to help the people, not just argue something. Not really politics.
All right. A lot of people, a lot of you are telling me that this is more or less intelligible. And let me tell you that we totally agree. I think this is more or less intelligible. Some people would say that it's not intelligible at all. And I think those people are wrong. Um, because you can make out, you can easily understand some of the words the person says. There might be problems with lexical resource, and there might be problems with the how much the person elaborates, how much the person extends the turn, but you can definitely understand some of the words. And if you get the question, if you know the question, you would understand even more. Let me show you a little bit. Of course, because I'm getting you biased. So 18. I know where to start, sorry.
I think be a journalist, they must be very fancy on their job and be be true about the things, and they also need to help to find something to help the people, not just argue something.
Yes, and I actually didn't show you the question. That's the question. What are the most important things that a journalist has to do in his or her job? Actually, her answer makes a lot of sense. It's just the lexical resource, I would say. And she has a few issues. I don't know the issues that you hear pronunciation wise, but I hear quite a few segmental things mostly. And I'm gonna show you in a minute what I hear anyway. So intelligibility is key. You know, it's all about intelligibility. I can tell you, just because I'm working on a project with a company designing a pronunciation app, that a lot of companies see intelligibility as the lack of accent, the lack of foreign accent. But then you know that the question is, whose accent? Whose foreign accent? What's a foreign accent? Um, who is the center here, and who is to determine what's the accent that our speaker needs to have? You know, that's, we are totally beyond that, and it makes me happy that all of you thought the recording was more or less intelligible, because that's definitely not what our partners say, and we're fighting what they see, what they hear. Vowel length, consonants and sentence prominence, that's something, of course, features that we normally focus on. Something to keep in mind is the set of priorities, pronunciation priorities defined in the lingua franca core, the tradition started by Jennifer Jenkins 2000. I'm gonna send you a few materials, by the way. This presentation has embedded articles, but I'm gonna send you a few things in the chat box in a few minutes. And this is something to keep in mind in a lesson, in an actual lesson. Raise your learners' awareness of the feature. I'm going to tell you which one I'd like this learner in the interview to focus on. There has to be some sort of perception work. There has to be activities where learners get to hear the sound, the feature, even if it is at sentence level or at conversation level. It's okay to give overt instruction, and I'll show you now what I mean by that. They learners have to practice, because otherwise just noticing is just not enough, and you need to give them feedback, of course. So this is a possible journey that I would go for with the student in the interview, the one doing the IELTS test. Um, the first issue I had was the pronunciation of fancy, because she didn't really pronounce a nasal sound, and it made it really, really difficult to hear her description of what journalists do and the type of work. Even if at the level of comprehensibility, saying that the work is fancy, it is hard to understand, but at the level of intelligibility, it would be intelligible. You would understand the word if she had said the voiced alveolar nasal. Work on articulation. Use Zoom. You can show your learners. The fact that the tip of your tongue is behind the front teeth is very evident on your screen. The tip of the tongue is not towards the back. It's not in the center. It's right behind the upper teeth. And you can show it easily. If you're in the physical classroom, they can use their mobile phone as mirrors. Oh, well, COVID. They can also watch videos. You could also make a video with your mobile before class if it's impossible for anybody to see each other's lips. Videos are a great source, a great solution for many things. Then expose this learner that has issues with syllable final N, expose them to the sound. So she's worked on articulation. She's seen herself putting the tongue right behind the upper teeth, saying yes, saying no, asking questions that lead to the pronunciation of that sound, like, do you want to go to a party? Yes. Do you want to marry me? No. Um, but you gotta expose them to that sound so somehow, uh, in some sort of source, a video from YouTube or something that you record yourself with your phone or with vocaroo.com. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, find an audio, a video from YouTube. And I'm not saying, by the way, to get them to listen to the whole video. Choose 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and get them to listen to those seconds anyway. And then at the end or towards the end, give them a task where they have to produce the sound naturally. In her case, anything that would get her to say no would be fantastic, or anything that would get her to use adverbs of frequency like never. Although never is word initially, we need something that is syllable final. um, I'm going to ask you a final question before I take your questions. Just tell me in the chat box, what would you focus in this learner's pronunciation? What do you think this learner can improve pronunciation wise? Let's have a listen.
And Victor,
Hi,
can you?
what's your name?
My name is Calvin.
Kelvin.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kelvin, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'd like to ask you about your school.
Yeah.
So, what subjects do you like most?
I think I like economics most because I can study different kind of demand and supply theory, and I can use it in the daily life to observe the market. I think that's very interesting and and very useful.
Okay.
All right, you got a few seconds. A very highly intelligible learner anyway, very intelligible speaker. But is there anything that you could still work on? Articulation. I guess you'd have to, yeah, define that in terms of consonants and vowels, right? Oh, you spotted something about something about the voiceless interdental. I didn't even hear that. He got me fooled. You see, the lingua franca core proponents, they tend to say that the distinction th is not extremely important, and I think you sort of hear it. You can totally understand when a person says, uh, when a person replaces one for the other, but it depends on what your learner wants and what your learner needs anyway. You know what I'd focus on? I just got like a couple of ideas. I think I'd focus a little bit on rhythm and intonation. I think the learner tends to sound a bit stilted. The learner tends to sound a bit monotone. Yes, exactly. Thank you for that private message. Intonation is a thing mostly when you want to contrast info that somebody else has given you, or when you want to highlight key info, right? All right, I only have a few more things to say, guys. Prepare your questions. We do have like 2 minutes. Um, but please remember you have so many resources online. You have the IATEFL pronunciation SIG I belong to. They do webinars every month. Please follow them everywhere. Also, British Council has a lot of materials, lesson plans that are already done that you can adapt, or you can, use parts and then supplement. You could follow the Teaching English Facebook page because it's a group of teachers from all over the world exchanging ideas. Of course, I'm plugging British Council products, of course. And the presentation, the deck also has a lot of resources I use. You have the Jenkins I was telling you about before and a bit more. This is the time, and I'm gonna give the host a chance to maybe ask any questions, because this is that time, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Victor Carrasquero, for your presentation. And thank you everyone for attending, of course, this session. Well, we have a couple of minutes for questions. You can even ask your questions by raising your hand or on the chat box.
As you think about your questions, I'm gonna drop some materials in the chat box for everybody.
Okay, Victor, I have one question, okay, based on your presentation. Okay, you spoke about putting sounds all together, okay, especially with young learners. But for example, in our context, because we are on the another side of the world, and how can we be here as English teachers with first interference in our classes? What recommendations can you provide us, especially to prevent first transference in our language classes? Victor, are you there? Can see you. So we have some internet problems. Okay, any other comment or question? Meanwhile, Victor comes back. Okay, Victor is already here.
Hello.
Hello, Victor. Okay, you
I'm
have.
so sorry. My computer died.
Okay, don't worry, Victor. That would happen to anybody. Okay. So Victor, I was asking a very simple question. Okay, you spoke about putting sounds all together. Okay, at the very beginning of your presentation. However, I would like to get some recommendations from you. Okay, as language teachers, okay, how can we deal with first transference or interference in our classes? Especially because you have taught English to speakers of other languages.
Yeah, something I really like doing is getting learners, exposing learners to many different models. I tend to use a lot of video And I tend to use very short segments, very short parts of videos on YouTube, and I get them to imitate things a character says. I don't want them to imitate an accent, but I want them to imitate how the character stresses a keyword, how a character uses intonation for showing an emotion, for example. And that's really important. They're not imitating accents, they're imitating features.
Okay.
That's one thing.
Yeah, that's one thing. And one thing that you have mentioned is the focus of pronunciation, I think, has somehow changed. So now teaching pronunciation to speakers of different languages is not only based on accent acquisition, imitating an accent, but on intelligibility.
Definitely, that's the point. It's accent addition instead of reduction. You're adding more to your own identity. And this is something that all teachers have to bear in mind and remember. We're not trying to change our students' personalities. We all have an accent, and that accent is part of who we are. That accent is part of our identity. So what we do is adding features that will help us be more comprehensible, more intelligible.
Okay, thank you, Victor. That your comment is very useful, especially because sometimes teachers or students stress out in acquiring an accent, and the accent is not, I think, in my opinion, it's not the most important aspect, okay, when learning a foreign language. Okay, I have talked a lot. Any other comment or question from the audience?
I think there was something in the chat box. I cannot see it because in the emergency, I just got my mobile and.
Okay, don't worry, because they were giving some comment to you, but in private. Okay, any other comment? Not in private, but in public?
I think Ignacio has a question.
Okay, yes, Ignacio says, this question is related to Mr. Casimiro's questions. Okay, let's see. To what extent can we allow our students to keep their native language sounds? Okay, how can we know which sounds are important to foster in order to make our students' speech intelligible?
So that's a really interesting question. I think you can allow anything as far as your speech is easily understood by a range of listeners. I'm saying that because it's not only, it doesn't have to be easily understood by an American listener or by a British listener. It has to be intelligible to a range of listeners in the global scenario. That's really, really important. So I would allow anything as long, anything L1 accent, L1 feature related, as long as speech is comprehensible. And remember that pronunciation is only one part of comprehensibility. You also have lexis setting barriers, putting barriers to comprehensibility, and grammar choices as well.
Okay, thank you, Victor, for your answer. And of course, thank you, Ignacio, for your question. Okay, we have only one. Okay.
Just to clarify something, I'm talking about general English. This is general English instruction. I'm pretty sure that if an actor will perform in a play or a movie and needs to portray a specific accent, then the learning needs of that actor are very specific. You know what I mean? I'm talking about general English and what people in an international setting need.
Okay, so students' needs are, of course, a very important aspect to consider when teaching pronunciation. Okay, thank you, Victor. And thank you, Ignacio, for your question. Okay, we have 1 minute to ask another question or make any other comments. Okay. Is there any other questions or comments that you want to share with us in the audience? Okay. Well, Mr. Carrasquero, okay, as Vice Principal of the School of Pedagogy in the English Language and Teaching Practice Coordinator, I would like to express our gratitude for your talk entitled From the Lab to the Classroom, Fleshing Out Phonetic Theory in Our Teaching. Your outstanding participation as a guest professor represents a significant and, of course, an invaluable learning opportunity in the academic formation of our future EFL teachers. And we hope, of course, to have your support in other academic instances of teacher training at our university, Universidad Austral de Chile. Thank you very much, Mr. Carrasquero, for your presentation, and we hope to have your support in future instances.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll also be sharing my materials with you, so maybe you can help me share them with your students.
It will be our pleasure. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this session. And once again, thank you very much, Viktor, for being wired from China, especially because there is evening there. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice day.